Saturday night's main event is back, and a last-minute addition gets us to 4 matches, so let's get a quartet of wins to start off a very busy weekend. I'm not sure you could miss pro wrestling this weekend if you tried, so we'll have a separate video for Evolution next, but we'll start it off with betting Saturday night's main event. So let's, as always, start with our recap, and we went 5-1 at Night of Champions, and our only miss was Solo Sikoa defeating Jacob Fatu for the US title, and I would have liked for Fatu to retain here as he had 0 one-on-one title defenses and just 1 total defense since beating Knight at WrestleMania, but they decided to debut Talo Tonga and bring back Tonga Loa to build Sikoa back up to have 3 henchmen that he, of course, needed all of them to get the win. And we had heard rumblings of Talo's debut, but I thought he might just cause a DQ and wreck Fatu afterwards, but I have to admit I don't hate this call by WWE. So that takes me to a 17-2 overall record since BackLash, which is an impressive, at least I think so, 89.47%. And we wagered 4.25 units last show, and we won 3.25 units and lost that 1 full unit bet. So we are pretty miffed that our 2 losses are both full unit plays. So I need to be not so overconfident on these mid-card title matches apparently, but we're still up 6 units post WrestleMania. And this is the 4th Saturday night's main event in this new era, and it is number 40 overall. And the only thing to note from the 4th original Saturday night's main event is that it aired on January 4th, 1986 from Tampa, Florida, where Hulk Hogan retained the WWF title by defeating Terry Funk. And I was at the last Saturday night's main event, which also happened to be in Tampa, where Jey Uso retained, and then John Cena also won a non-title match. But with Jey winning that one, new champions have been crowned just in 2 of 55 total title matches, which is merely 3.64% of the time. Because, as I always say, and say it with me, champions retain, and it's a glorified house show. Since champions retain, let's start with our World Heavyweight Championship match, which is Gunther at -800 for 88.89% implied probability, taking on Goldberg at +425 for a 19.05% implied probability. So why Gunther? Well, for once, this really doesn't have much to do with him, because he simply can't lose to a 58-year-old in his retirement match. So, in order to continue to be that dominant ring general, he simply has to win this one. So let's reiterate this is Goldberg's retirement match, so, as they always say in wrestling, you are supposed to go out on your back. So why would now be any different for Goldberg? So if Goldberg wins, that means he would win the title and then retire to leave the title vacant. And we did just see that about a year ago on AEW, where Sting retired after retaining the AEW World Tag Team Championships with Darby Allin. And this has never happened in WWE as far as I could tell. So I'm pretty sure WWE is simply not going to be caught copying AEW this soon. However, I will admit it would be a major swerve for Goldberg to win the match and then get cashed in on by Seth Rollins. And we'll talk about Rollins a little bit more shortly since he has his own match, but if Goldberg were to win under these circumstances, he would not have to vacate the title because he just would have lost it. But this being a retirement match, to me, makes it less likely of a cash-in, as you don't really want to see all these shenanigans in your final match. So whether it is successful, failed, or foiled, this is simply not the proper way to send a legend out to retirement. So like him or not, this is not going to happen. So Goldberg, of course, will find a way to get in a spear and hopefully get Gunther up for a jackhammer. But of course, Gunther is going to choke out Goldberg to retain that title, so Gunther is the pick, and this is a full unit bet. Match number 2, speaking of Seth Rollins, he is at -900 for a 90% implied probability, taking on LA Knight at plus 500 for 16.67%. So why Rollins here? Well, essentially this is going to be a 1-on-3 battle, right? Well, that hasn't helped Bronson Reed's win-loss record so far, but Rollins, on the other hand, is on fire as he has 7 straight wins of any match type, plus 5 straight one-on-one victories, with his only one-on-one loss in 2025 being to CM Punk all the way back on the Netflix premiere of Raw. So Rollins, of course, could win cleanly, just like he did this week against Penta on Raw, or he could also win with distractions galore from both Breakker and Reed, which is pretty much what happened at last Saturday night's main event, when Bronson Reed made his surprise return to help both Rollins and Breakker win their tag match against Punk and Zayn. So why could LA Knight here? Well, we've seen several times that briefcase holders often lose a lot of matches because it doesn't really matter for them. And last year, Tiffany Stratton was the perfect example, as she went 0-5 in one-on-one matches and just 2-10-1 in all matches before she successfully cashed in. Now, Seth Rollins himself was 22-13-3 in one-on-one matches the last time he was Mr. Money in the Bank, and he in fact lost to Randy Orton at WrestleMania before he cashed in later that night. And I will say I do think that is unlikely, but I suppose it is possible here. But it's not like Knight is cold per se, because he does have the most TV one-on-one wins of any male in 2025, as he has 9, 3-2 in one-on-one matches. And he did just get a DQ win versus Bronson Reed a few weeks ago when Breakker speared him twice and then Reed tsunami'd him 3 times. So yeah, the DQ win potential is really about as high as it gets here, and with now the 3 other matches that we have, it looks like the bad guys are going to win all of those matches, so it would make some sense for one good guy to actually get a win on the show. So it is certainly possible that Knight sneaks in a win here by overcoming all of the shenanigans he's going to see, and Breakker will possibly end up spearing Rollins by accident, and I tend to lean towards Knight versus Breakker at SummerSlam. So is that from Breakker costing Knight here, or is it from Breakker retaliating after Knight gets away from him? But admittedly, that is pretty hard to say here. However, there is the fairly likely return of CM Punk, who was able to chase Rollins into the crowd 2 weeks ago. That led him right into the popcorn-eating LA Knight hanging out in the club level of PPG Paints Arena. But Punk didn't appear this week on Raw, so perhaps they were holding him back and is due to make an appearance this week. Or, less likely, but certainly still possible, is the return of the OTC Roman Reigns, and Paul Heyman did just say that Reigns doesn't have the balls to step up to this new group on Raw. So if there was ever a signal that the dude is returning, I have to say that this just might be it. And we do know that he will be wrestling at SummerSlam, so this is mercifully for all of us the last premiere event for men before SummerSlam. And admittedly, Seth Rollins is the only match that makes sense in storyline for Reigns at the moment, so I don't know why you just wait for Raw when you can get this on NBC. And in glorified house show rules fashion, of course, Roman Reigns can take out Reed, Breakker, and Rollins without the ref seeing any of it to hand Knight an easy win. And don't forget that AEW All in Texas starts at 3 p.m. and since their pay-per-views take forever, I'd say it's a pretty good way to upstage a certain Shield Brothers main event match, where he's going to lose, of course, with the return of another Shield brother taking out the third Shield brother so that he would lose too. And lastly, should Cena win at SummerSlam and remain a heel for now, LA Knight does make the most sense for Cena's first post-SummerSlam defense. So this is the hardest pick for me of the entire weekend, so what seems so straightforward with Seth Rollins just doesn't feel like it does anything for him, while it certainly can help Knight to continue his never-ending climb to the big prize. So with a little help from the OTC, this is the first upset pick of the cycle finally. LA Knight plus 425 is our pick, and we'll give it a half unit bet. Match number 3 is Drew McIntyre at minus 350 for 77.78% implied probability, taking on Randy Orton at plus 225 for 30.77%. So why McIntyre here? This is his first match in 1.5 months, as his last match was also at Saturday night's main event, where he lost to Damian Priest inside a steel cage. And I do like picking wins in return matches to start to heat up those who had been out. And especially McIntyre does seem to need it right now, with his last win being 2.5 months ago. And this also has the feeling of a multi-match series against Orton, so it makes perfect sense to repeat the match at SummerSlam. So if McIntyre can pick up this first win, with Orton again not living up to the legend killer status before finding something inside of him in that rematch. So why Orton here? Well, maybe he already learned his lesson after his loss to Cody Rhodes, because he absolutely did not hesitate on that RKO on McIntyre on SmackDown. So he could simply be here to get his first big win to make up for that loss at King of the Ring. So the problem for Orton here is simply timing, as Cody Rhodes is already booked for John Cena at SummerSlam, so they are both already off the table. And anything other than a rematch at SummerSlam against McIntyre just doesn't really make sense right now. So we simply have to go back to traditional booking of heels winning the first match in a series of matches. So Drew McIntyre is our pick, and we will give this a half unit bet. And match number 4, well, this was added to the card just minutes before I was set to film, so I had to go back and add it. So this is for the United States title. Solo Sikoa is at minus 3,000 for 96.77% implied probability, taking on Jimmy Uso at plus 900 for 10%. There's simply no way Sikoa loses the title here. It's simply here to give us something to fill out the card. And of course that means we're waiting for Sikoa and Fatu to have a rematch at SummerSlam, but we do have glorified house show rules to apply here, because Solo doesn't really care if he wins this match. He's simply going to care about keeping that title any way possible and having his goons beat up Jimmy and also Fatu when he inevitably tries to help out Jimmy. So a DQ loss by Sikoa is certainly on the table here. However, because this is his first defense and he needs to look somewhat decent, we are going to make Sikoa the pick here, but due to those shenanigans galore, we'll play this small with a quarter unit bet. So let's get to our recap here, and at least we have 4 matches to recap. So we have Gunther at minus 601 unit, LA Knight at plus 425 and a half unit, Drew McIntyre at minus 350 and 1 unit, and Solo Sikoa at minus 3,000 and a quarter unit. So remember to never bet more than you can afford to lose, and I'm sure you'll already be settled onto the couch by the time Saturday night's main event rolls around. So let's just enjoy it for the glorified house show that it is. But if you missed last week's Stop the 10 count, where I bemoaned the build to both of this weekend's premier events, be sure to go right on over here and check that out. But until the next time, which will be very soon, I am the SportsZu, and this is a podcast that needs a new name.